Hi guys, this is another podcast with horsemanship from Ginny. I'm Yaz. Sorry about the background noise. I am driving again. Like I've said in previous podcasts, a lot of my time is spent on the road travelling to and from different clients. I'm currently on my way to Shropshire to do a loading client. It's today I'm going to talk about the 4 quadrants of training. It's probably going to be a very short podcast this, because there's not a lot to say, but it's just a basic explanation. You could Google it if you don't want to listen to a podcast about it. It's quite simple, the 4 quadrants of training, to a point. So while I'm talking about this, I want you to be aware that horse training isn't linear. There are a lot of nuances. Things that can be punishments can also be rewards to certain horses. If you've got a horse that likes to have its mouth played with and it likes to bite and play with you using its mouth, potentially smacking them on the nose to stop them doing that could be, in their eyes, you interacting, and could be seen as a positive thing for the horse and a reward for the horse. They're getting what they want out of you. So you've got to look at the horse in front of you and determine what they consider rewards, what they consider punishments. It is not up to us to decide how horses learn and what horses consider a punishment. So I'm going to start off with what I'm starting off with is what's positive, what's negative, what's punishment, and what is reinforcement. So positive and negative oftentimes don't mean what people think they are in the 4 quadrants. It's a very pedantic argument though. It's often an argument people use online to prove people wrong when everyone knew what the fuck they meant. When people say negative reinforcement, most people mean positive punishment, and you'll oftentimes get people on their little keyboards online going, you meant positive punishment, when they've said negative reinforcement, and everyone knows what the fuck they're talking about. Leave it alone. It doesn't matter. So while it's technically incorrect, who gives a shit? We know what you're on about. It doesn't matter. It's a very pedantic argument correcting someone on that, because it's in pop culture, negative reinforcement is used to mean positive punishment. But for the technical terms, positive and negative, what do they mean? So positive in the 4 quadrants, to be correct, positive means you are adding a stimulus, you are adding something to your training, you are adding something to the horse. It has nothing to do whether it's good or bad. It simply means you are adding something. It's positive, negative. Negative means you are taking something away. Whether it's good or bad has nothing to do with whether it's positive or negative. Absolutely nothing to do with it. It is just add or take away in the literal sense of what positive and negative mean. So then we get on to reinforcement and punishment. That is where you get your good or bad. So your positive, your reinforcement is when you're doing something that is more likely to increase is going to increase a behaviour. If it's not increasing that behaviour, it is not reinforcement. Regardless of how you feel about it, you might feel like you're doing something that's reinforcing the behaviour. If it doesn't increase the likelihood of that behaviour coming again, it's not reinforcement. Your horse doesn't feel like it's reinforcement. Your horse, chances are, feels like it's punishment or very neutral. They feel neither here nor there about it. So you've got punishment. Punishment is when you want a horse to reduce a behaviour that you are seeing. So if you're doing something where you want to see more of the behaviour and you're seeing less of it, you are punishing your horse by accident. So it doesn't matter whether it's by accident, you are punishing your horse. So let's get into the more nuanced things about it. So we'll talk about going to start off with positive reinforcement. Most people know what positive reinforcement is. Pretty much anyone who has ever trained an animal knows that positive reinforcement is where essentially you give your horse a treat. There are lots of other things that can be positive reinforcement. It depends on the animal. If your horse likes a good scratch, that'll be positive reinforcement. If your horse just likes a nice little pat and to be left alone, that's positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is where you give a horse something to increase the likelihood of a behaviour. We do it a lot with dogs. Easiest way to explain it with dogs, you ask a dog to sit, the dog sits, you give him a treat. It's that simple. And so chances are, whenever you ask your dog to sit, if you're consistent with it, you will see your dog sit. And oftentimes what positive reinforcement creates is a horse offering the behaviour without being asked. So you have to be careful what you teach your horse, because if you haven't taught your horse many things on how to win and how to remove pressure and how to get out of a situation that they don't understand, is you have to you could teach them something like the Spanish walk. If you teach the horse something like a Spanish walk and it knows not much else to get itself out of trouble, the horse can end up throwing those behaviours at you in situations where you don't want them. So that's something to be careful of when using positive reinforcement. Be careful what you teach your horse and make sure that they know exactly when using those behaviours earns them that reward. So if you teach your horse to rear, for example, you don't accidentally teach your horse to use rearing as a way of getting out of things, because they can then start to reward themselves. Say, for example, they don't want to leave the yard. Napping. Let's go in napping, for example. They don't want to leave the yard. You've taught your horse to rear up, or maybe you've not taught them to rear up, but we're going with this as it's a behaviour we've taught. You've taught your horse to rear up. Your horse rears up when leaving the yard. You then bottle it and you go back to the yard. The horse sees that as being rewarded for that behaviour. It is a lot more complicated than that, but that is a very basic. I'm just wanting to explain the 4 quadrants. So I don't want to go too much into the nuances and off track and on odd trajectories with it. So that is essentially what positive reinforcement is. You give them something to increase the behaviour. Like I said earlier, if you're giving the horse something and it doesn't increase the behaviour and it reduces the behaviour, you are punishing your horse. No matter what way you're looking at it, your horse is being punished in their eyes. So, like I talked about in my treat podcast, if I give Jasper a pat for picking his feet out, he's going to become more and more difficult to pick his feet out because he doesn't see a pat as anything pleasurable, or a scratch or a rub. He doesn't see any of that anything pleasurable. It's me adding more pressure to him. So next I'm going to talk about positive punishment. Like I said a little bit earlier, this often gets mistaken for negative reinforcement. It doesn't really matter if you use the wrong words. It's a pedantic argument, doesn't matter. As long as you're still being correct in your training, doesn't matter what words you use. Obviously, when teaching other people, it's better that you get it right because it's just correct. But again, it doesn't matter that much. As long as you're doing it right, it doesn't matter what words you're saying or how you describe it. So, positive punishment is adding something to reduce a behaviour. So that could be smacking your horse, screaming at your horse, shouting at your horse, scaring your horse in any way. There are lots of methods you can use. Some horses and some animals are really sensitive to punishment, and they're really sensitive to people being disappointed in them. And so, say some horses, you can be like, that was shit, I really didn't like it when you did that, and it can really affect them and it can upset them a bit, and that can be enough of a punishment for some horses for them not to do that behaviour anymore, or to reduce that behaviour. Not many horses are that sensitive. That's more of a dog thing than horses, but they can be. I've met a couple your disappointment is enough to really get through to a horse. But if you put heavy levels of punishment with high pressure on them, so you smack those horses with a stick, they could come back at you. Those horses that oftentimes will come back at you with heavy punishment, often they can be quite soft once you get through to them, and they can be really quite sensitive to your disappointment and dislike of something that they're doing. And that can be enough. Punishment in a lot of people's eyes these days is seen as cruel and unnecessary, because we have all these other ways. In my opinion, punishment doesn't necessarily make it cruel. It depends on how you apply that punishment, how harsh you are with that punishment, whether you've lost your temper through that punishment, whether you're frustrated through that punishment. If you're level-headed and the punishment is to the right intensity to the behaviour that you've seen, there's nothing wrong with it. If a horse is regularly biting you and sees it as punishment to get a tap on the nose when you tell them to fuck off, stop doing that, they'll reduce the behaviour. If they don't see it as punishment, they'll keep doing it. So it depends on the horse. You've got to find things that discourage them, and you want to find things that discourage them in the lightest way possible. For some horses, when they've hit high levels of stress and they're becoming very dangerous to handle, you can cry all you like about the fact that the punishment shouldn't be that hard. It's the only level of pressure that can get through to the horse in that level of stress. As soon as the horse will come down from that level of stress, as long as you follow it down and you don't keep that pressure high, you're seeing progress, you're having the right effect, that's fine. As long as you're not opening your horses up with a schooling whip and your spurs and stuff like that, you're not hurting your horses. I've got no issue with pressure and punishments being relatively harsh on horses, because they can be dangerous. They're fucking big animals. We've got to get through to them. That you can't just run me over, you can't kick me, rearing up and striking out at me. It's just dangerous. I need you to stop, and I need you to stop it now. Because you can't help a horse if it's killed you. You just can't. You know, it helps no one if that horse hurts someone. So that was a little bit of a rant, but then you've got negative reinforcement. So negative reinforcement is removing something to reinforce a horse and to see more of a behaviour. So, for example, putting your leg on a horse to ask them to move forward. Pressure and release. Pressure and release is essentially positive punishment and negative reinforcement. It doesn't stay like that forever, oftentimes, but you get on a young horse that's never had someone on its back before, chances are, if you just put your leg on, you're going to get a bad reaction to it, because the horse doesn't like it, it sees it as punishment. As you condition your horse, because this is where conditioning comes in, as you condition your horse, it stops becoming punishment as the training goes on. So it becomes pressure. It's no longer punishment. So yeah, negative reinforcement. For example, if you're using your leg, you put your leg on to ask the horse to move forward. As soon as they move forward, you take your leg off. You may have rein pressure for something to ask the horse to soften to the bit. As soon as they soften to the bit, you release that pressure and soften your arm, or give the horse its head, or something along those lines. Things like that. Oftentimes in my natural horsemanship, I want the horse to go left or right. I'll point, and if they ignore that or they don't understand it, I'll swing the rope in the direction I want them to move away from, and as soon as they move, I take that rope away. Which is why it's really important that you remove pressures, because otherwise, if you, for example, you've got a horse that you're lunging, you have a whip behind it, and you've asked it to move forwards, it's moved forwards, and then you keep swinging the whip at it, it never gets that negative reinforcement where the whip goes away and they realise that's the right thing, and you will never see that increase of behaviour because you're constantly punishing them through the exercise. they don't understand that you're just trying to keep them moving because they're being lazy. I would rather someone be harsher initially with the lunge whip. So say for example you've sent the horse out, the horse is going round, but you're constantly having to keep them going, otherwise they're going to stop. If you up that pressure quite significantly, and say that you use the whip to make a lot of noise, to make really make that swooshing sound, or use a crack, and it really jumps the horse into moving, as long as you then stop, that horse will learn that pressure doesn't come on unless I stop, or unless I don't maintain the pace I'm at. If you continue, you're going to have a horse that gets numb to the stick, gets numb to any sort, and then you start having to get really hard on the horse. If you're going to increase pressure and you're going to increase a punishment, what you have to do is you have to increase it quite significantly. If you creep that pressure up slowly, so say for example you start with your whip pointing at the horse and you give it a little flick, the horse ignores that, so you give it another little flick, the horse ignores that, so you flick a little bit harder, horse might give you a little bit of a reaction but then go back to what they were doing, so you flick a little bit harder again, horse starts to ignore it. You're slowly numbing your horse to that pressure, and then later on, to get your horse to respond, you've got to use a lot of pressure, and it starts moving your horse into the unethical places of punishment to be able to even get a response out of them, because you've just spent so long teaching your horse to ignore it. So what you're best off doing in those situations is, say for example you just start off with your whip pointing at the horse, you flick it at the horse, it ignores it, now I'm going to crack the whip. I'll jump straight to something that's going to go, they can go, fucking hell, I really didn't like that, and they'll move off. And then they can maintain their pace, and if they don't, I'll up that pressure suddenly again. Horses learn very quickly then, because chances are, if horses are very clever at going, chances are if you're willing to make that jump, you're willing to make another jump, and they don't want the next jump. It's not very often I have to show the horse the next jump because I don't like doing it, but some horses that have been really, really numb to pressure, that next jump is you can't avoid it, which is just a little bit of a sting with the whip. And yeah, it's not nice. No one wants to smack their horses, but sometimes it depends on what training they've had before them, their personalities as well. Sometimes that's what it takes. What else? So then we've got negative punishment. Negative punishment is slightly trickier and can be harder to actually do. So negative punishment is taking something away from a horse that they like in order to see less of the behaviour that you're seeing. So, for example, I'm using Jasper a lot because he's my horse and I'm training him, and I'm using all 4 of the quadrants with him. Less of the punishment with him at the minute because he doesn't really need it. Less of the positive punishment because he doesn't really need any of that. What was it? Negative punishment. So you remove something from the horse that they like in order to see less of a behaviour. So for example with Jasper, when I'm teaching him to pick his feet out at the minute, if he snatches his foot away, he doesn't get a treat. It's that simple. And you can use that for horses that, say for the biting horse for example, a lot of the horses that play bite, and if you smack them on the nose they carry on, they're like, oh yeah, this is great fun, I love this. A lot of those horses, negative punishment is walking away. You walk away, I'll stop interacting. If you want to interact with me like this, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave the situation, you can fuck off. That can be punishment enough for a lot of horses that want to interact with you with their mouths to stop them from doing it anymore. So that's an example of negative punishment. Now there is a little caveat to positive punishment that I want to put in there, which I meant to say earlier but I forgot. If you're using positive punishment and you punish a horse for a behaviour positively, say you use a stick, you use your leg, you use pressure, whatever, if that horse then doesn't do what you were asking, chances are it didn't know enough for you to punish them. So what happens when you use positive punishment is you're correcting a horse, you're correcting that animal for their behaviour, and so they should know another behaviour to choose alternatively in order to remove that punishment and earn a reward. If they don't, and your punishments are just ending up with explosions, and you're just ending up with a more and more difficult horse to deal with, and they're becoming fearful, the horse doesn't understand something. It doesn't understand how to get out of this situation. For example, when I was working with Sam in the early days, first session, I was trying to teach him to go right on the lunge, so he moved to the right, and I was using my rope on his left hand side to put pressure on him to move him to the right. He would blow through that and run straight to me, run straight at me. And the more pressure I put on, the worse he was going to get. So what that means is this horse doesn't understand. The horse doesn't understand the punishment, and he doesn't understand how to get rid of it. So at that point, you have to show your horse how to get rid of it. All it was with Sam in that situation was I needed to show him how to move his shoulders away from me, so when he went to move off that pressure, he knew how to move around me rather than running at me. He didn't understand how to go around someone. And you can argue that he should have known, and horses aren't stupid. The fact is, he didn't understand it, and he was showing me over and over again that he didn't understand it. And there's no point in arguing what he should know. There is no point in arguing any of the shoulds, ifs and buts of any of it. He doesn't. That's all that matters, and he needs to know, because otherwise these punishments are never going to work, and you're going to keep punishing that horse, and the punishments are going to get harsher and harsher until you see a result that you want, and you may not get it. The horse needs to know the answer. How do I remove this punishment? How do I get my reward? Which can be negative reinforcement. How do I remove it? How do I get rid of it? How do I fix this situation? Horses get very upset when punishment is added and they don't understand or know how to remove it. And the punishment just keeps getting worse, and then they stop thinking, they start panicking, they're just stressing out, they don't understand. Now they're not thinking, they're not even trying, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing because it doesn't matter anyway. And eventually they'll hurt you. Or eventually the person gives up because they're not willing to go to any further. That's often what happens, is people especially with clients by the time they come to me, is they are no longer willing to push that punishment further because it's hitting their ethical boundaries, which is a good thing. It doesn't matter, there is nothing wrong with you not knowing how to show a horse how to get out of this situation and stopping the punishment and then finding help and finding other ways to do it. That will do no harm at all. Carrying on when you don't know what to do will severely damage your horse and traumatise them, and then you've got a big problem on your hands. So if you're punishing your horse and nothing is getting better, you're doing something wrong, the horse doesn't understand something, find ways to explain it to them what you want, and then once they understand what you want from them, you can punish them for not doing it. But if they don't go straight back into the behaviour that they should be doing, again, you're missing something. It's really important, that part. For example, I'm going to use my dogs for an example because I work with protection dogs and this is how I learned it. Say, for example, I put my dog in a down state and they break that down state. I may use my e-collar, I may have a lead on the dog. I will put a physical correction in with that dog, whether it's a pop on the lead or whether it is a press of the button on the e-collar, and it can be high, it can be low. It depends on the dog, depends on the situation, depends on how well what they work well with. If that dog doesn't return straight back into the down, it didn't know it should have stayed in it. It didn't know what it was supposed to be doing. That is then the flaw of the owner. You shouldn't have punished it, you should have shown it. those mistakes don't matter so much as long as you see that. As long as, say for example, you're in very low level punishment and the horse isn't understanding. As long as you see that, it doesn't matter that you used punishment when you shouldn't have. Go back and fix it. Go back and see the problem. Don't just get pissed off with your horse. Don't just get frustrated because things aren't going the way you want it to or going as fast as you want it to. Remove the punishment, show them what you want them to do, and show them how to do it. Break it down for the horse. Punishment shouldn't be used to mask poor training. So there's lots of different opinions in training. You've got your force free, you've got your don't use treat slot, you've got your high punishment, just punish a horse into doing what they're doing. Very few people admit that's ever what they're actually doing, but a lot of trainers, when they're training horses, all they're doing is punishing their horse. They are never, ever actually showing a horse what to do or how to do it. They just punish their horse until the horse figures it out. That is not okay. That is called compulsion training, and you are training your horse by compelling them through pain and fear into doing what you want them to do. That's never okay. You cannot do that to animals. It's cruel. To a point as well. Again, there are nuances in this. Compulsion training can be very effective at times, as long as you're not becoming unfair on the horse. If you're becoming unfair on the horse, compulsion training is cruel. It's not fair. But compulsion training has its place. People will often say no, never has its place, but it has its place. Compulsion training can be used, and it can be used right, and it can be effective. I just prefer it not to be used as the whole of someone's training with a horse. Compulsion training has its places in training, but I would prefer, personally, it's not the whole of their training. So then you've got the R+ side of things, the positive reinforcement side of things. Yes, it works. Training horses using positive reinforcement works in lab settings. It works until life gets in the way, unfortunately. Sometimes shit happens. Your horse might get stung by a bee while you're riding it. Positive reinforcement isn't going to keep control of that horse, unfortunately. Compulsion is going to keep control of that horse until you can get yourself into a safe situation. The horse calms down from the shock of what's happened to him. That's how you control. So management of behaviours is compulsion, through and through. When you're managing behaviours, you're using compulsion. Especially dangerous behaviours. There's no point pulling a treat out trying to control a horse that's trying to cave someone's head in. No point. It's not going to work. Horses will not take treats when they're stressed as well. So compulsion training is how you manage horses. Reward is how you train horses to do tricks and things you want to see more of. There's a lot of positives to reward-based training, don't get me wrong. But it goes it gets into the more extreme side of things sometimes, to the point where I've had discussions with people who are on the R+ side of things, and they can't see oftentimes when they're putting positive punishment into their horses by accident. You cannot avoid positive punishment with horses. You can't avoid putting pressure on your horses. It is impossible to do. Walking into your field to go and get your horse is a type of pressure you're putting on your horse. It's part of life, it happens. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a punishment. However, for a horse that's hard to catch, it very well could be. And in those discussions, they said, well, you don't go into the field, you target train your horse. And how the fuck do you target train your horse if you don't interact with them and you don't put pressures on them to ask them to even look at the target. If you're just stood 8 acres away from your horse and with a target in your hand on the outside of a fence, chances are you're not going to teach your horse to do fuck all. Like I said, they're you get very extremes on all sides of these fences. You've got your R+, you've got your compulsion, and then you've got your balanced in the middle. I'm very much in the middle. So there's a dog trainer who, what do they call it? Force free first. Force free first would be my thing. I will do anything I can with the horses without using punishment until it's no longer avoidable. That's my aim. I'm not always perfect in that. I make mistakes. Sometimes I'll jump to punishment a bit quicker than I would if I watched the video back and I'm like, probably jumped a bit fast to punishing the horse there. Doesn't make the training ineffective, just might make it a little bit less fair than it could have been on the horse. Wow, this podcast turned into a slight lot longer than I planned on it being. But yeah, so those are the basics of what the 4 quadrants of training are, what positive and negative mean in training, if you're using the correct terminology, what punishment and reinforcement is, how to use it, a few examples of how to use them. But like I said at the start, horse training isn't linear. Things change. Things that your horse could have seen as a punishment in the past, you could have conditioned to being a reward. At some point, I intend to condition Jasper into having a scratch and a pat or a rub as a reward for things, so I'm not always having to give him treats because he's getting fat. So yeah, things change. It's not that linear. It's just a very basic way to explain what's going on with the horse, and how to train them. Opinions vary. You get extremes on all sides of the fence with it. Do what's best for you and your horse. Just try and always be empathetic, and as long as your horse, when using punishment, as long as your horse understands what the punishment is for and how to remove it, you're not doing anything wrong. So people can argue all they like that you should never punish a horse. I disagree. I think punishment is part and parcel of learning, and I will use other horses to punish horses for me, so I don't have to do it. For example, that's why I've got Fox. She, her job as a fairly moody older mare is to kick fuck out of the horses that want to plough into her. So if I get horses in of my own horses, I won't do that to clients' horses because they're not my horses to break. But for example, Jasper, as soon as he's gelded, he'll be going in with Fox, and she will keep him in check and keep his manners in place and teach him how to move away from her pressures. And if he doesn't move, she's going to kick him, she's going to bite him, and that saves me having to do that. I then don't have to put those heavy, horrible pressures onto him. That's the horse's job to teach, in my opinion. Horses' jobs to teach other horses to move away and move off pressures. That's not our job. That's what horses should be doing to one another. But that's a whole other podcast that I'm going to do. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. I will be doing a live Q&A on my Patreon every fortnight. I'll be using questions from the comments of my podcast, comments on my YouTube videos, questions messaged to me. It's a Q&A. It'll be live as well, so any of my Patreon users will be able to ask questions at the time of the live being on if you're watching. And for anyone else who isn't a Patreon member, you will get the live posted to YouTube a week later or so, or the day after. So it'll be non-interactive on YouTube, but that's where I'll be posting it. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Have a good day, guys. See you next time.